Before we conclude today, we should mention here as well, just like in all of the other marakis, some of the advice of the scholars regarding what is well known these days, the coronavirus and all these issues. The scholars have given some advice regarding it because it is something now that is serious in terms of its level of spread. It may not be particularly serious for the majority of people in terms of the health implications. Most people, or as they say in their figures and stats, 99% of people who catch it will recover and no problem. But that isn't the point. Even if you catch it, there are the normal flu and cold and fevers and pains and all that which occurs. But the threat is to those who are more elderly, those who have underlying health conditions. The government is even planning now to request everybody over the age of 70 to stay in their homes and not leave for 4 months. They are considering it. They are considering this because the over 70s, that's where the danger is. They catch this and it does cause a danger to the level it can be critical. And they do have to go into intensive care. So for those with problems, respiratory issues, heart conditions, other problems, it's a serious thing. So for those who are younger, it may not be a problem for us directly, insha'Allah, but it's about the spread to the elders in the community. And that spread occurs via us. In fact, they say the biggest spread is by the youngest people. The youngest people are the ones with the least symptoms. They recover quickly, couple of days, a little cold, a little cough, and they recover. But they are the ones who then pass it on the most. The youngest people, kids, recover from it quite easily, inshallah, as they say. Young people recover quite easily, but it's the spread that they cause which is the problem for those who are elder and for those who have medical problems. So we do have to take it seriously now, and the scholars are taking it seriously too now, in terms of it being a disease that is spreading and is infecting by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they've mentioned a few things. One of them is regarding attending the masjid for the jama'ah, for the 5 daily prayers and for the Jum'ah prayer, that if you are infected, you've been diagnosed, it is haram for you to go to the masjid, and stay away until you are clear. Also, even if you haven't been infected, but you are supposed to be self-isolating or in other quarantine, then it's upon you to do that. You must go do that self-isolation or the quarantine and stay away from the masjid also, and cannot come to the masjid in that state. Pray at home, pray where you're isolating, pray your dhuhr instead of Jum'ah. And thirdly, those who have a greater problem because of their age or because of other health issues, and there's a greater problem for them if they catch the disease, it is permissible for them to miss too. It is permissible for them to miss the Jum'ah and pray dhuhr at home. Permissible for them to miss the Jama'ah and just pray it at home. And in these times now, it is permissible to do that. And it's probably going to continue for a while. They don't expect the peak to occur in the UK for another 4 weeks or so, another month, 6 weeks, another 2 or 3 months before it finally starts to drop, they estimate, June time. So there's going to be a problem for the next couple of months. And everybody has to take it seriously in terms of not necessarily your own health, inshallah, there won't be much, inshallah. But it's about the spread to those who are vulnerable, those who are older in age, those who are of the generation above us in the community. That's where the real threat is. Hence the scholars have mentioned all this advice. You can even stay away from the masjid for those affected and the categories we just mentioned. They even said, a few of the scholars now have even said, you don't need to shake hands these days. When you give salam, give verbally, assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, without shaking hands. Scholars have even said this now. So, not just one, more than one now. More than one from the scholars have said, you don't give salams with a physical handshake these days. Do it just verbally. Because Islam allows us to take the means of protection. It is now medically and scientifically understood, or more than likely expected, that one of the means of transmission by the decree of Allah is through physical contact and shaking of hands, etc. So Islam allows us protection without doubt. So the scholars have said, these days now, when you give salam, even without physical handshakes, give the salam verbally. The obligation is the verbal salam. Handshake is an extra on top, extra sunnah on top. If you leave that, you haven't abandoned anything. It's not like you're abandoning the obligation. The obligation is to give the sunnah is to give the salam, and the obligation is to reply to the salam. The handshake is on top of that. So the scholars have said, in these circumstances, it's better to avoid the handshake right now because of the situation that we're in. So these types of things do have to be things that you bear in mind. And it may not be, like we said, because of a real threat or danger to your health, but it's because of the spread to the elders in the community. And so there's a responsibility upon everyone to make sure they do follow the medical advice being given about washing and hands and hygiene and all that. You have to do it. Don't think this is just, they're talking about it and do this and do that. You have to do these things. The scholars have said do these things. And this is something Islamically, purification we're upon anyway. So to be upon that purification, you do it. Do the guidelines that they are giving you about washing the hands and minimizing contact. And scholars are even saying the same thing now. If you don't need to go out to places, don't go. Only go where you need to go. Don't just go out for the sake of going out now to here, to there, because it is spreading properly, this disease. It is spreading. They expect in most countries now, a lot of these countries, that eventually, figures of 80% they are saying. Germany they're saying it, in the UK they're saying it too. That possibly up to 80% of the population will probably get it. One scientist the other day even said, today in fact, said eventually everybody will get it. But some of them will get it later on, maybe later, and maybe not, because maybe later vaccinations will be made. But in this initial burst, a huge proportion of the population will get it. And it's not the problem for the young, but it's the problem for the elderly mostly. So as a Muslim, a person has to take care of himself and of others. And that's what the permanent or the major scholars, they said, the committee of major scholars, you do not receive harm, neither do you do something to cause harm. So now if you don't take care and you end up spreading it because you're not taking care, you may only have a couple of days of a cough, but you're okay again, but then you've spread it to elders and others in the community, you've caused harm by the decree of Allah that you've spread it. So a person does have to take care with this, and all the medical advice and the advice that's being given about isolation and things, you have to do it. You do it. A person experiences any of those symptoms now, the fever, the coughs, the muscle pain, all those types of things, you experience that, you do stay away. You stay away, you keep it, you do the isolation thing they are talking about. You do all of that now. This is the advice medically, and this is what the scholars have said, you follow out then. Follow out and do those things to remove harm from yourself and to stop harming others. So that is something that does have to be implemented. You experience those symptoms, then do what they're telling you medically. Isolate, etc. for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. Let the symptoms die down, check up, go get tests, whatever. You do that if it occurs. So this has to be something we bear in mind. We need to implement these things now as they are being mentioned. The medical advice, etc. does have to be done. And we'll have to see how things progress over the next few weeks, inshaAllah ta'ala. So we'll round off on that for today and hopefully carry on next week. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
What if someone sticks their hand out if you go outside?
Explain to them. It's another Muslim, you can explain to them. Tell them, right now we have this situation going on, and scholars are advising about these things, and talk to them and explain to them. Somebody who doesn't understand, it's going to be maybe somebody elderly or it's going to be hard to not. And so you can shake hands. It's not like anybody's telling you it's haram to do it. They're just saying this is one of the measures that you can implement Islamically for protection. So if a situation is awkward, shake hands and then go make sure you do your washing and everything.
What about traveling to other countries?
Impermissible. It is impermissible to travel at this stage right now. Even if it isn't now, it's only about a week away or 2 weeks away, where if they expect upon their models and projections, you're going to get to Italy and Spain kind of levels. But even now, at this stage, practically it's at the Islamic ruling of being impermissible to travel. And I mean, it doesn't really matter too much because you're not going to find a plane to go anywhere anyway these days now. But it's impermissible because some people, they might say, the other day we were talking about it, what if you go to another country that has the equal number of breakout as UK? That in the UK there are 1,000 cases, 30 deaths. Netherlands has 1,000 cases and 30 deaths roughly. So if I travel there, it's an equal thing from here to there. Impermissible still. Impermissible now. In this kind of scenario and situation, you have to do Islamically what you can do to minimize any further outbreak by the decree of Allah. And to minimize it, obviously, you do not travel. That's the advice in the hadith about the plague. Obviously, this is not a plague level, but the rulings are similar. So you don't travel still. At this stage now, there shouldn't be any traveling going on to other countries and things. And probably not for a while. Anything else?
What about the people that are stocking up on food?
Yeah. You have to, as a Muslim, we don't behave in manners that are silly, as is occurring from some of the people with this toilet roll thing and everything else. But you're going to go do your shopping, you get what you need to get, you do what you do as normal. And if you were to increase a slight percentage over what you would have got, it's not a big deal. But to do the type of thing which is happening, that's not the way of a Muslim. To go and clear out shelves of this and shelves of that. So you do what you need to do as the regular type of thing, even if you got some little extra. Maybe there's somebody in your family who would require it, somebody who is in the vulnerable category. So okay, so be it, a little bit extra, but not to go to the levels of what you see from the people. Alright, so inshallah, we'll carry on next week then.